Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Sam for another spoiler discussion. And this week we are, of course, talking The Last of Us Episode 2, Infected, directed by Neil Druckmann, who you may have known is involved in, just casually creating both of the games and being a showrunner. So this is going to be a very fun episode to talk about. But first of all, Sam, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, thank you. Another great episode. Glad that we're really going in now to the main story as we head into the main era of Joel and Ellie. And obviously great to get some more backstory, more so than we've ever got before. So happy to dive in.
No, absolutely, and it is the same here, which is an exciting one. We've had a week now since the last episode. There's been a whole week of people discussing online the reception, the viewing figures. We're going to get into a little bit of that before we deep dive into the second episode. But before we do, we want to hear from everybody who has watched it at home. So please do comment below with your thoughts on The Last of Us. And we'll go with the same rules as last week. We are going to talk about the events of today's episode. This is an outright spoiler discussion. Try and avoid spoiling the games, please. There will be people that are watching that maybe haven't played the game. They might be playing the game as we speak and going through, but we don't want to ruin future episodes for them. So let's try and keep it to everything we've seen. If we do want to bring up the game, because we're going to talk about the game a lot tonight, then obviously bring up the moments that you maybe saw in this episode and whatnot. And as I said, it's just being polite. So comment anything, and as happened last week, if people are commenting potentially spoilerific stuff or asking for stuff from future episodes because they have been seen, they will just delete the comments because we don't want anyone watching to have something spoiled in the comments chat anyway. So as we said, please do get involved, but do keep it kind. And if you like this video, if you like the spoiler discussion, you're watching it down the line, obviously leave us a comment. And if you want more, we'll be live every Monday, so you can hit that subscribe button. And if you want to find out about what other videos are coming up, because we're entering Oscar season, and I kind of sighed at that point. Things are going to get busy. It's going to be very different. And whenever we've got videos to announce, reviews, or drop, we put them on our social medias first. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. We have a link to Redbubble in the description where you can pick up some merch to help support the channel. But enough of that. Let's talk The Last of Us. And just as a polite catch-up from last week, Sam, what were your thoughts on episode 1, just very quickly as a whole?
Very strong start. Absolutely love that we've managed to dig deep more into the initial inception of everything, what actually happened, Joel and Sarah and Tommy, obviously replicating the game very well, but also introducing some new elements, giving us a bit more time with characters, and just really building up this world, which we then move into when we get to present day 2023, with Joel and Tess and meeting Ellie and Marlene. So it's a lot of setup, but with the time that they had, they really managed to do it effectively, and just setting us up for the rest of this season.
No, I'm with you on that 100%. It was a great introductory episode. I think they nailed it, not splitting the episodes, putting two together. A longer intro brings you on board with the past and the current story. And obviously that ending was a big key of making that work with the whole 20 years later, seeing the same circumstances. So it was a great opening, and kind of where we'll segue. Before we start kicking into episode 2, we're actually going to talk about things from the last couple of days. So I'm not here just to read reports, but we want to pinpoint, like what happened with House of Dragon. If HBO has got some good news, they will announce that good news. This is their second most viewed opening episode to a series since Boardwalk Empire, which I think is 2010 or 2011, and obviously second after House of Dragon, which is that's a spin-off to their biggest ever series. So you can look at that however you want. No season 2 announcement, I would say brackets as of yet. I think they'll drop that as soon as the season's finished. And I'll give some thoughts on that towards the end of the series, probably, because there'll be people watching that maybe won't know how it's going to go, or they won't know there's a second game. So maybe they don't want to announce the season 2 now, whereas House of Dragon, we all knew was 200 years before, so it's a prequel, everything's off the limit. So that's a lovely bit of news that's had a good, strong start. And then I guess we'll talk about the game very quickly. The game itself, and part 2 is included within this. In the last week, there's been an insane spike of the sales going up, which is kind of as expected with a show like this. You're going to have people that watch it, that haven't played it, they might have owned it or want a new version. The current game top of the PS4 charts this week is now The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know if this is just America or worldwide, though. It has flown to the top. Obviously, you can only buy Part 2 on PS4. It's not been remastered for PS5. I would say, yeah, it will probably happen at some point. I don't think it needs to. I think they just could easily do a free patch and put it onto PS5. And in line with Part 2 going to the top of the charts, the Part 1 PS5 version has apparently sales have gone up the roof. And I'm guessing most people, the PS4 one had it through PS Plus, and the sales have gone up a bit on The Last of Us Part 1. So it's a very good week to be Sony and a very good week to be Neil Druckmann. But what are your thoughts quickly just on those sales numbers? Is it kind of what you expected this early, or are you surprised?
No, I definitely think it's expected. I think word of mouth and just general marketing of this show has really helped anyway. Plus, the really good reception, the good reviews. It's pretty much been positive across the board, apart from some negatives, which you'll expect anyway. And I've seen it when I've gone on, my PlayStation. I've seen when I've gone onto the PlayStation Store or PS Plus. You've seen The Last of Us. It's like the first thing that's on there. So for gamers anyway, that's front and center. You've got the old version, you've got the remastered version of Part 1. I think maybe some people who were hesitant to have bought Part 2 initially because of reaction back then and now fully in the series and have just gone, oh, right, well, I've played the first game already. I may as well do the second game. There's a bunch of people who've now bought the first game are going to be wanting more straight away, and rather than waiting a week, they're going to be getting to the second game. So, I mean, all of this is just great publicity at the end of the day. There's going to be no complaints from HBO, no complaints from Sony or anyone behind. And you're right, it'll probably crescendo into the series, the season finishing, the announcement of the new one. I mean, not unlike a lot of shows at the moment, this is a weekly series and is not bingeable. And for those shows, you've got to wait weeks and weeks to get those numbers in to see what they're going to do about the future. Whereas with this, I think they're going to have a pretty good idea of how this is going to turn out anyway. So now they can actually really formulate a plan and use the next few weeks to really kind of look into what they're going to do next and then how they're going to announce it as well. So hopefully it'll be continued good news.
Yeah, I'm with you. And kind of in line of that, one of my friends was over yesterday for the football. And I don't know if I spoke about him on the trailer discussion we did, or maybe last week, but we went to college together. And when the game came out, he basically played it and finished like a day or two before me. But it was the opening weekend for all intents and purposes. And we've always spoke about it, the series, the hype coming into it, the casting, all that sort of stuff. And when it came around yesterday, he was saying his girlfriend watched the first episode with him last week. And since then, she started playing the game. Now, it's not a spoiler. When it came around yesterday, it's probably, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He texted me saying that she was up to Sam and Henry. I'm just going to leave those names there if you've not played the game. You won't know those names yet. If you play the game, you know roughly what part of the story that is in. And then just before we went live, we were chatting. He says that she's finished the game. She's on to part 2 already. So it's really interesting that this is going to happen. And then I've got another friend who's messaged who sort of said that he's not played the game or seen the series. What would he do first? And I would say in this circumstance, watch the series first now. Play the game when the series is done. I have finished my replay. I finished... I've got the PS5 version. I finished, I think, story mode like Wednesday or Thursday, like 1 a.m. And then I played Left Behind and finished that yesterday. So that was real good fun to do. And it is a great way to talk about some of the coming episodes moving forwards. I don't want to sit here and list off changes and whatnot. We're not going to do that, but we're going to talk a lot about, I guess, like the gameplay mechanics, moments from the games that pop up in the series, because that's a really, what would you say, like a big part of the discussion? Like I've noticed a lot of people on Twitter are all talking about, oh, they did this scene so well, or they brought back memories here. Like it's really interesting seeing how people have reacted so far.
Yeah, I mean, there's general vibes of just, oh, this has changed, that's changed, and that's exciting. And other people kind of wanting more explanations as to why things have changed, which some things have been explained, and other things I'm sure down the line will be. I think some things are just quite obvious as well. But yeah, I think it's good to kind of know that things have changed, but not necessarily dive into what was in the game. And in fact, just say, right, well, unlike the game, this is doing this, but it comes out in this way, or they cut this way down, which I think we've said already in the last episode anyway, that they'd already done that with many of the present day stuff. It looks like that's going to continue, but I think that's really going to help with the pacing and make sure that things don't get too stale.
No, definitely. And it'll be a really interesting segue for today's episode. Obviously, if you've seen it by now, if you haven't, honestly, don't watch this video, watch it and come back and catch up later on, because we're going to go into spoilers. There's some big moments of this episode. And kind of kickstarting, which was one of the... we had 1968 as an incredible segment, and certainly something I'm missing out on, which you're not, which is going to be really fun on the week-to-week discussions, is because I'd seen the whole series and I was able to binge it, I've missed out on the week-to-week discussions. I've missed out on people targeting certain moments, quotes, scenes. But the one scene that's blown up last week is the 1968 prologue. And I could sit there smiling because I know, okay, there's going to be another great one in a week's time. And here we are today, 2003 Jakarta. I just kind of want your thoughts on that scene, and I'll give mine after, because I didn't expect it. I thought 1968, heading into Sarah's death, will stick with modern time until the end of the series. And I was so pleasantly surprised, but I'm curious about you heading into this.
Agreed. I was shocked. I'm pleasantly surprised. It's something that I think some shows do, and I think some shows will take elements where they may occasionally do a pre-title sequence that showcases a different character's perspective or goes back in time, or just something that helps engage with either that week's plot or just helps with the long-running character arc or something to do with that. What's interesting about this one is that it takes you where you wouldn't have expected to go, which was to Jakarta in Indonesia, which of course was mentioned on the radio in the last episode. And it's funny because a lot of the discussion over the past week has been how did it get started? And there's all these things about flour and about eating things, and and that's could have been part of the reason how the granny became infected, because you see her eating those. And so there's been all this like discord online, and then rather than it just kind of being left open, they just say, okay, we're going to pinpoint you to where it happened, not to like the very, very start, but when it gets noticed. And I think it's so eerie to kind of start off with just a busy city and then get military just finding you in a small restaurant. And I thought, what is going on here? But then as soon as the conversation began and you learned who they were trying to find, then it just made complete sense. And I have to say, this whole pre-title with the character Ibu Ratner, played by Christine Hakim, again, it's one of those things where it's like John Hannah in the last episode like completely stole that 1968 sequence, and then she completely steals this. Christine, she absolutely just takes on board for which is only a few minutes of story, but creates a character that I'm a little bit invested in, and I'm kind of grateful that she was there. Again, not a place, not a character, not anything that we'd seen before in the games or even could have predicted would be a part of this. Yet it's done in such a way where it's so believable, it's so tragic, creepy. There's a lot of things that happen, and I think that's what I gotta say about the show in general. Like, you go through so many different emotions at various times in one episode. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, she absolutely steals the show, and I think just her final kind of, not necessarily a monologue, but her final lines of the show, of her scene, is incredibly like haunting and said with such conviction. And you can tell that she's such a trained actress. She absolutely knows what she's doing, and she kills it. I'm so happy that it was a part of this.
Yeah, and it's kind of in line with a lot of changes that happened. Well, it's not changes, it's sort of last week that we're going to develop the scenario, right? When you're on the game, you are Sarah, you are Joel, you are Ellie. These are the three you stick with. You stick with these guys' stories. Now, some of those beautiful parts of the Last of Us game is picking up the notes around the cities, finding out these family stories. I think Ish in the sewers is a big one that you literally just follow it room to room to room. And I think what I love that the series is doing is by giving us these prologues for 2 episodes in a row now, we're learning about what actually happened, what has led to this, because heading into it as a TV format, you need to sell something to the audience. You need to say, this is the situation of how this went down. because you've got to translate that properly on TV. And it was such a great way to do it. So, and I think all the difference, and this is going to sound so weird, but I hope it makes sense. The fact they went with Jakarta, it wasn't Washington in the Pentagon with a president or something. To take a scientist out with arm place, I thought when I first saw it, oh my God, has she got an infected family member? Are they just going to put her in the street and execute her? But you get the horror of learning her about the science, the autopsy, and the moment when she's asking, she almost turns the interrogation around, and she says, "How many are missing? 14." And you just start seeing the glass shaking. Don't want to get on Twitter trends, but you've all seen the Pfizer memes today.
Yes.
And it was just one of those that she sells the scenario. That is outright fear. And then I think the big thing for me, and I said this to you before we went live, is that when I was watching my dad tonight, obviously I know what's coming. And she makes that, the guy says almost, what do we do? And my dad sort of made a comment like, oh, she'll say like pray or something. But it's when it's the conviction, she said, it's bomb. Simple. And it's so much more dangerous. It's so much more impactful. And kind of in line with that, she then wants to go home to her family. She's almost signed her own death sentence. Like, send me home. I want to go to my family. We're all screwed. Bomb the city. And then just to get the opening off the back of that is just remarkable. And then to think, like, following this up, this is the first ever episode of TV Neil Druckmann's directed, I believe. His back, we wax lyrical about like Dave Filoni, who I love, who's made the jump from animated series to live action TV, video game director to live action TV series director. That is a completely different industry. There's almost no parallels as far as I'm concerned, bar the concept of storytelling. And I just thought it was an amazing way to get us ready for the second episode, and kind of reading today what so many people thought, that now people are saying what was the better opening, 1968 or 2003, and they're both completely different in their own rights, and I think they're both two amazing scenes, but I don't really want to compare them. But if I was going to put you on the spot, what would you say?
I would probably say this one. I probably would say 2003. I think if I was going to choose one to stay, this makes more sense as it's actually, within the confines of this plot. It's actually taken us to a point that it's to do with this cordyceps infection. I just think it's intelligent as well, because and after the episode, when I wasn't working at lunchtime, I managed to just kind of like look into it a little bit, and there'd been a recent SARS outbreak apparently in the region, and so and you see a SARS banner in the building where the scientist is taken to. And so it's just interesting to kind of like see those little bits from what's happening at that time that would kind of put people on edge. That would, it's already kind of on the membrane. You're thinking about it. And so just that anyway, plus the horrific autopsy, which just confirms what you may have already been thinking of. And I know we spoke just prior to this about what we thought about the first episode with the granny, and if it was hair in the mouth or the cordyceps. And I think I thought it was hair at first, but then realized it wasn't. And to actually get a closer look and to actually see that it's moving, and it just, for me, it made me kind of appreciate the horror of the game more, because I know this is separate, but it makes you think of a fungus, and wow, it's growing inside you and it's enveloping you, and I think it makes you appreciate the process of the evolution of the infected. And of course, we get one of the late stages of the infected in this episode, which is fantastic. But it just gives you different perspectives. One just being in this time, one in this different destination, seeing how this got started, and it's from such a normal everyday thing that was a flower factory, just like super fine, and one person just changed one day and bit people, and that's just how it is. And I think it's rare that we get things so handed to us on a plate. We don't, in media, especially nowadays, it's very much, make your own perceptions about things. How did it start in Shaun of the Dead? We have no idea. The Walking Dead, there's hints, but there's no like official confirmation properly. Here we're told second episode in, and I just think that's really brave of them to do, to kind of say this is the backstory, and we're going to stick with it, and that is going to be the law and rule of thumb moving forwards for the rest of this series. So it's a very interesting setup and a very strong start to this episode, and it's just effective on so many levels.
No, definitely, and it's great to get your thoughts on it as well, seeing it for that first time, and kind of what we'll do for people watching home. So last week when we did this, we had a quite long episode. If you didn't already work it out, and obviously we sort of had 2 episodes together. We had the prologue. Well, we had 1968, the prologue, and then the main episode. But for this, we're going to kind of revert to talking the main story points. So we'll probably have a location, a moment. We'll discuss the scene, and then we'll move on, not scene by scene, but sort of big episode moment by big episode moment. So kind of following the credits, we obviously get, the way last week was left, we had them playing Depeche Mode, running into the rain of Boston outside the QZ, which, speaking of stats, not quite the Stranger Things effect, but Depeche Mode their streaming's gone up 520% on Spotify this week. Largely, a lot of that's probably also my fault, because I was probably the guy playing it loads the week before because I'd already seen it. And I think my dad said last week, goes, "That's why you keep playing it." I was like, "Yeah." I think every time I discover something for a film, there's just like disappointment from like the music community. But that's just the way I watch things. And
At least you found the music, and that's absolutely the main thing. You can't complain.
I knew who they were. They're one of his favorite bands, but I was like, I don't know music. It's not my forte. Is films. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of them where at least it's there. At least it's there. But at least there's not going to be millions of fan cams like running at the wall of those stupid Twitter replies, nothing to do with the subject of the series, and it's like they're just playing Kate Bush for no reason.
Running up that hill, George.
Sorry, that's it. It's been a long time ago.
Running up the wall. Like
I feel like
cut that running up the wall.
It's a good thing we're not live. But kind of following that, we've got probably one of the more important scenes of the episode, and we've got we've called it the interrogation, haven't we? We've got Joel and Tess watching over Ellie, who's asleep. Not gonna lie, it made me hungry. I really wanted a chicken sandwich after watching this scene.
Same.
I don't know what they're eating. Like, it looked like malt loaf or like
it's like a jerky. Yeah.
It's just. I mean, they did a good job of them realizing that they're screwed. But what were your thoughts on the scene? Because obviously we know Joel as a character because we've both played the game. So we know what his thoughts are going to be on the people, what his thoughts are on Ellie. But selling it to you in a TV series is so much different. And I love the angle they approached of Tess is the one trying to help her, not Joel. Whereas in the game, it's way more 50-50 from the pair of them. Like, the pair of them can't be asked to that. But this episode and setting up in this scene, today's episode's about Tess. I've kept her as the thumbnail for obvious reasons. I'm just going to immediately say off the back, they've done a much better job of developing in a TV series. And this is the first, to me, supporting character where we've seen their full character arc, first episodes, and you can make those game comparisons. And I absolutely want to praise Anna Torv for this episode today. She was incredible throughout. And again, going back to Neil Druckmann, Craig Mazin on script duty, they have wrote this script fundamentally, not to say we're just copying the events of a game. We're doing this for television. We're adapting it. And the test of so important to get it right, because you're 2 episodes in, you're invested in these characters. Your casual person's not going to think. Your casual person probably thinks Tess is going to be around to the end of the series. We know she's not, but other people might. And I just thought the opening scene was a really good way to get it going. And also with Ellie as well, with Bella Ramsey. I spoke last week saying that Ellie really starts to come into it, episodes sort of 2 to 4. I think the scene of her sitting down, we're starting to see more of the chemistry, and we're starting to get to see her act and become Ellie. And I thought this scene was a big moment for that. Yeah,
I think it's the end of the last episode. I want to say the first episode, but because it does feel like 2 episodes combined, it's difficult to say. But I think the end of the last episode, where Tess realizes that Ellie's infected, clearly that's kind of the catalyst for a change within her. I think that her and Joel are so used to the world that they're in that to shock them it's got to be something massive, and someone being bit and not changing would be one of the biggest shocks of all. So I can absolutely see why you would be kind of suspicious of that, why you might not believe it, but also how that could really affect how you perceive everything, because it does change everything, and you start to believe it. So Tess changes a lot just in this episode alone in what she's thinking, and part of that is due to what happens to her at the end. But this beginning, she is the one who's leading this, and it does feel like she wants to know all the information, because of course anyone would. You want to know, how did you get bit? Why? Like, what's going on? What were you told? So for me, it did feel like an interrogation, because even though it wasn't like a torture scene or anything like that, it was very much like, we're sat here, we don't trust you. What is going on here? Is this a setup? So you can understand the confusion for sure. And I just love that Joel is just being so kind of like, he's so over it already. He didn't want to do this in the first place. Neither of them did. But I think Tess is very focused on the end goal. What do we get out of this? It doesn't really matter who she is, as long as we do our bit. And that shifts from oh, it's just us doing this job, to, oh, she is someone. This is so important, not just to us, but to everyone. And I think it's kind of, this episode is the unraveling of Tess to a person who she could have been before this happened. I think in the game we see a very hardened Tess, and we've seen that in the last episode, but I feel we get much more of an emotional side to it this episode. And I do want to watch this episode again, just to kind of see her evolution, because it's so quick. And I think that's just with spending time with someone like Ellie as well, who is so carefree. I think she respects Ellie. She basically says that, like, about when she explains about going to the mall and stuff. It's just different. Again, it's different perspectives, and seeing bounce relationships off each other. It's just really interesting. And luckily, they had great characters to kind of work from the game, and just take the best parts of that and go, right, what can we do with the scripts? Because it needs to be character heavy. This, you cannot focus on the infected all the time. It doesn't work like that. Well, if it did, it would not work very well. But no, it's fantastic. And then there's humor thrown in there as well, which always helps too.
Yeah, and I think the humor is a big thing. Like, even the shot of Ellie waking up and you just seeing them sitting over the gun. It shouldn't be funny, but it's the way they frame it, the way they shoot it. And I think, and that's a big thing the game has, that when you're playing the game, you're spending time with these characters. You do get funny interactions, and a lot of it's the innocence of someone like Ellie. And kind of following through this, like when we get to the hotel, we have the whole the hotel foyer scene from the game, and it's a really interesting approach they've made to this with the adaptation side of things, because there's a lot, and people curious at home how we approach these sort of videos. This is trickier than normal, because book to film is easy. It's page to screen. You can look into that however you want. What's the black and white? Did this thing from this line to this line of dialogue make it easy? But a game as a collective is something you could do in 6 hours. It's something you could do in 12 hours. You might go back and 100% it. It's not like a book. You can't just like read 8 chapters and skip it. There's so much more to the game. Sorry, and The Last of Us itself is one of those games where it's not open world, but you don't need to search 20 houses, but you can. And I do, and that's how I enjoy to play it, and others might not. And it's, how do you cater both sides of that interest, and how do you sell it to people? Because the people that haven't played it probably just don't want to see them walking around buildings for an hour at a time. And that was really interesting for me to watching my dad, was that last week was great. It's the story, it's getting you into it. How's episode 2 going to go down? Which, for me at least, felt heavier on the, we're going to move the plot and we're going to really go in for some of these things from the game. And if we sort of move forward with this, that they make it clear that we need to get to this building. What do they call it? It's got the golden roof, which is from the game.
Yeah, I think they call it something slightly different. It's like not government house, something. It's something like
that, isn't it?
It's something like that, but I think it's slightly changed from the game.
It's the ultimate Uncharted thing. It's like press L3 to view, and it like ping golden top, and you get it on the rooftops in this, which is great. And it means nothing to a lot of people, but for other people, it's a cool nod. And this is the way like references should be done. That I don't want to sit here and just list amazing references. Everybody's probably going to do it, but it's not taking you out of the story to do anything. It's just the choices they're making reflect that of which you may have played in the past. And it's I think it's a lot more, because I saw a few people last week criticize the series that it's too faithful, and I can understand there's a criticism, but I don't think this is, when someone says it's too faithful, this isn't like Zack Snyder's panel to panel 300 being put on a TV screen. This is them being very specific in what they're choosing to move from the game to the series, because not everything's going to find its way into the show. But what they do, which I can certainly say moving forward, is that there's many little moments which will be appreciated by the gamers, and it isn't going to take anybody out of the episode that hasn't played it. It's not going to be such a, let's say that scene we spoke about with Ellie. Sorry, I keep waffling. Moving the bookcase out of the door, that means nothing, but it's something you have to do bloody hundreds of times in the game. So it's little mechanisms from the game that I think are really fun to see on screen, because you just know that whoever's working on this knows knows the source material.
Yeah, and I think what people might not understand is that, despite you may have played the video game for however many hours, whatever, those 12, 14 hours, whatever it is made up of hundreds of hours worth of work and little things that you may not have even got to, whether that's one room that had a certain item in that you had to get by doing a certain thing. One bit of that could be in the show and you wouldn't know it. And I think after watching this episode we said it last time, but I think you see more now of like, right, what can we pick and choose? Because they absolutely can do so and leave so much just to be game exclusive, which is absolutely fine. So I think the idea of it being too faithful is something that I do disagree with. And I think it's not like it's a film where it's a set amount of time and that's it. It's all self-contained in this. A TV series is much more different because you've got a lot more time, and it's something that could stretch seasons. You've got so much time to do this. And with any TV show, once you get to a certain point, you start to divert more and more and more from the original material if you've not got much of that left. So they're being, really clever already by saying, right, well, we are going to bring these things over because it's absolutely integral, important for us to do it. But not every line is. I'd say it's very, 1 in 10 lines maybe something from the game that's been tweaked to something. It's very rare that you're going to have an actual word for word line, from the game. So, I think it's too early to say that. Yeah, I think you would have to wait till the end of this season, kind of look back and go, right, maybe what you think. If you really wanted to deep dive that much into what's been replicated, then absolutely go ahead, do it. And I'm sure some people will. But, the exciting thing is what they take from that story, what they implement, and what do they change, but keep it on that same path that we're going on. Because I can't imagine the ending of this will stray too far from the ending of the first game. But you never know. They could have a completely different direction. They've got free reign to do whatever, really. But they've got to make sure that the initial steps are right, and people love that first game and the initial steps of that. So why not take from it as much as?
Yeah, and kind of stemming into the direction of, say, Neil Druckmann, episode 1, Craig Mazin directed, who's the showrunner, co-showrunner. Episode 2, Druckmann, the other co-showrunner. There's your two showrunners directing the first 2 episodes, which is probably the safest way. Mazin with the story made sense for last week, Druckmann with the knowledge of the game and whatnot this week. And kind of where it's going to lead into with next week and later on today, just talking about the hotel scene quickly, because it's not a big deal as such, but me and you spoke before that this is something that appeared at a much later point of the game. But then these are the choices they have to make as a TV show that, okay, we need to go up this building and through a building. What's maybe an iconic one that everyone can remember playing? What's something we could just do? Because, yeah, we could go through any building and say it's any building, but why not make it the hotel? Because that was quite a memorable moment within the game. And I kind of really enjoyed that today, that when we got to the hotel scene, you just spend a couple of seconds establishing the location. Here's like the dirty water running through the roof. Here's a frog on the keyboard. Here is it flooded. Ellie pretending, to be talking to the guard and imagining the scenario, and Joel sort of not mocking her as such, but we're building their relationship. At this point in time, that he's very cold towards her. He thinks she can turn. He doesn't want to touch her at this point in time either, which is a big thing towards the end of Tess. And it's interesting that they use these little moments to keep building towards it's going to go, because we all knew where today's episode was going. do we want to talk the museum next? Like, unless you've got something to say on the hotel, because it was very quickly done.
Yeah, it was, and I think that's why I was unsure, because I think the hotel in the game is in Pittsburgh, I think.
Yeah, it's a massive act. It's like a whole
yeah,
act.
yeah, and it's with a whole other, with an antagonistic group of people. It's a whole thing. Here it's just kind of glimpsing. You see the visual, and I think this is when I have to kind of like move to the visuals for a second, because you just mentioned some of the things that are in that hotel lobby, and you see like just things like lily pads on the water, and it just looked so gorgeous. And even seeing Boston in the daytime was beautiful to me. You see all this destruction. It's absolutely insane that you can even say, "Oh, look how good it is," but you really are put into that world, and I think that's why I think it's quite an exceptional directorial debut, if it is for him, because this is his vision brought to life, and it looks so real. And I think it's so important for new audiences to really envelop themselves into this new world, but then for the gamers and for people who played it, it's to go back to that world and feel like it's not too far away from something that they already know. So to have these gorgeous shots of like the collapsed buildings, which is one of the best pieces of imagery from that game, mixed in with like these sets that feel so worn in and so kind of dilapidated, yet still look good. And it's like with just nice conversations, Ellie speaking with Tess, being like, "Oh, did you ever stay at a place like this?" It's such normal talk, and I think I love those moments in the game where they are a bit more chill out, and you are experiencing the environment around you, and you hear, "Oh, this character's saying this piece of dialogue," and vice versa. So to just go through all that is wonderful, and then to realize, oh well, we actually can't go for the hotel. We actually have to go for the deadlier route, which is the museum, which we knew from the game anyway. So when that was brought up, I was like, "Oh no, we're heading for trouble."
Yeah, and kind of following that, I was just doing some research as well. So this is the first directing of anything Neil Druckmann's done outside of video games.
Wow.
And the games he's obviously directed is The Last of Us Part 2. Creative director is the term for games, isn't it? But The Last of Us, Left Behind, The Last of Us Part 2, and Uncharted 3, I think, or 4, I can't remember, sorry. So that's an insane jump up to be, directing an episode on one of the biggest shows in production. TV is always a great way to bring in these people, which Mandalorian's done in such a great way, giving chances to people who might have directed before, like Carl Weathers has done episodes, Bryce Dallas Howard really making a name for herself. And it's exciting to see that on TV, that they're not just restricting it to maybe one person, but that they brought in a team for it, and it is led by these people. It sets an example for them to follow, and kind of in line with that, heading into the museum, which is something that everyone knew the clickers were coming this week. And, when this series was announced, and I can remember the tweet, everyone was commenting about how are you going to do the clickers? And when the teaser came out, I think it ended with, I think they did HBO do like a clicker version of the HBO intro. Everyone's known heading into this that, people have, I'm not going to be arrogant and say I'm not scared of them. I'm not, but the clickers are, how do I compare it to Dot 2? The Weeping Angels visually are like, this is going to sound really insulting. Modern Doctor Who villains, you think of the Weeping Angel. And I'm not a big Whovian, but as an outsider who used to watch it a lot, I can tell you about the Weeping Angels. There are gamers who never played The Last of Us that know what the clickers are and have heard of the clickers. And they're one of the most iconic things about The Last of Us, that they were so, not groundbreaking, they were so terrifying when the game came out 10 years ago, that's all what people were talking about. You'd be in a room, you're low on ammo, and there's a clicker running at you because you've stepped on a plate maybe too loud. How are you going to do that on TV? And the build up to that, I don't want to call it horror, but the whole museum segment from them, checking that the cordyceps isn't active, he says it's dry, that they could all be dead, to them finding a mauled body at the front door and then realizing that they're here, not by name, don't need to say it, just be silent. this is like 10 of the best minutes of the TV episodes there. And this is a fundamentally excellent episode all around. But I thought they just absolutely nailed everything about the clickers. And this is probably why Neil Druckmann has directed this episode, because if you get the clickers wrong, that's like getting Sonic the Hedgehog wrong on that film when they made them change all the CGI, you know? If you were to get something that's wrong, I think a lot of people would be very worried moving forward. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think he actually says in the behind the scenes thing that was released that before a shot of film was done, he wanted the clickers to be correct because that's how important they are. And within the show as well, within this episode, you get that tonal shift from the scenes that I just played before with the hotel to then they're at the door to the museum, and then it just escalates and escalates, and you feel the tension. And again, I think that's going to be a really important part of this show is the use of tension, because there's so many moments like this in the game where you do have to not go in all guns blazing. And like you said, just about the Doctor Who thing. I mean, the clickers are the aside from Joel and Ellie, are the most recognizable piece of media from the game, and a very important IP, I guess. It is like the modern day Dalek or the Weeping Angel or any form of antagonist from any form of show, film, book, whatever. This is the one. So this has to be right. And you feel that sense of horror when you're playing for the first time. You see these creatures, which are the next level of infected. And that sticks with you, I think, no matter how scared you are or not, because it changes how you need to play the game, because these are not creatures that, abide by the normal rules. They have an armored head. They are faster. They use sound, though. They can't see. They are very slow moving. And when they see you, you hear like a music drop. And then suddenly things change and things go wild. And that plays out like that here, basically. To see our characters just slowly moving, and then to have one kind of like deep breath suddenly make things happen, to have glass shattered to divert them, to then stepping on a piece of glass, then suddenly a clicker is jumping onto you. It's awful. I would class it as horror, because I think it is horrendous, horrific, whatever you want to call it. Some people are going to have been absolutely terrified by that. Luckily, I wasn't so terrified. If it was my first time ever seeing a clicker properly, I think I probably would have been.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing as well, that you would have been terrified, because not that they've been able to copy it over well, but it's the fact that the direction of that entire scene, the fact it's almost pitch black. They've not just walked into a room and said, "Oh God, what's this horrible noise?" There's a build up for a few minutes of there's something up here, and we don't know what it is, and there's just something uncomfortable. And this is such a strange tangent for me to go on, but American history is a very weird thing for me. Not at the lack of it, because there's a couple of 100 years as such, but it's all like that, like late 1800s type history. Like you're in like an old museum, you think of, they've got like photos of the boats, how the buildings used to be, and the setting of it at a museum there's some weird trajectory that it's not like a humongous hall like modern museums. It's this old house that just happens to be in museums. And you do get things like that. I remember school trips when I was younger, and you go to museums that are in like old, like Victorian houses. There was something chilling about the scene, the location, and then the way they actually play out the scenes done very well. Like you'll spend time with Joel, and then you're following the other characters running, and Joel's left alone in another room, and they got the balance right. And I want to say, was there 2 or 3 clickers? There wasn't many.
And it looks like 2, because 2 were killed, but
yeah. And the big thing with TV, I would say, is that less is more, and that's a fundamental from a game adaptation. Is you can't put these characters in a scenario where they're going to go in a room with 10 clickers, because that just wouldn't work. That would be, because immediately you have to kill 10. But how much hard work was it for 3 characters to kill 2 of them? Technically, one got bit who's already immune, and then someone else obviously got bit who, is a big part of how the episode ends. And I just thought it was a really good way to bring them on at an early episodes, because you don't meet them in the game for a couple of hours, whereas episode 2 of the TV show you're in, and I think it was essential for them to get that right.
Yeah, and I think this is when the timing is really important, because within in game it feels like you spend longer with Tess than you do in the show. And I definitely, once I kind of in my mind was like, oh yeah, she's definitely going to be out of this by the end of this episode, I did go, oh well, we've really not spent that much time with her. And I think it just is the fact that with the game you create that with the characters, however long you're going to be invested, just like you mentioned at the beginning about you are going to check every room. And I'm very similar about, I'm kind of like try to complete as much as possible. I don't want to kind of leave any stone unturned. So it ends up feeling like you're spending more time, and it is kind of similar scenario. You first really see the clickers at this point in the game, before you're going to give Ellie away at that point. Yeah. So it does feel early, but it's absolutely right to do so. I think they potentially could have done a whole other episode, really kind of like building up the character relationships and introducing this new world properly. Have that be an episode and then do what happens here. But I suppose with the amount of story that they've got to go, I think it's absolutely fine to cut it down. And this is, again, back to they were allowed to pick and choose. They've got free reign to do that. And if they feel that for the best direction of this story, that it's best to get Tess out of the way sooner than later, then we may as well do that. That means it pushes the clickers up earlier, which is fantastic, and gives us more breathing room later on to really build the dynamic between Ellie and Joel. So, I mean, I'm absolutely fine with it happening where it did, but as you said, it does mean that we reach Tess's final moments.
Yeah, which we know is coming, and I think a great moment as well is the fact that the series really builds up that Ellie's going to go away with these guys. They need her to go away. They need the car battery. They keep bringing the car battery up, and to have all, I think in the game the soldiers are all dead. I'm ready to stop doing the whole in the game this, because it reminds me of like Game of Thrones. Like in the books, this page happened before page 3, and but the whole switch and juxtaposition of the ending of this, that they're already all dead inside, and we get the standoff of Tess when Ellie works out she's infected. It's not the other way around, and this is where the test of plays it really well. That Anna Torv's an amazing performance in this episode. The workings out of her being infected, and Pedro Pascal, who we've not spoke about much in this episode, mainly because I think we just keep calling him Joel, which he is. But Pedro Pascal has an unbelievable moment when he finds out Tess is infected, and she goes to touch him, and he snatches back, and you sense fear. And it was like last week when you spoke that Tess's reaction when she found out Ellie was infected. Last week, Anatole's reaction was so well done. This week, I just couldn't believe how they played the scene up, and we had the build up earlier of the infected are connected. They hint at it could all be underground, which is an even more terrifying concept. That this fungi's kind of, it's like not Flash Gordon's alive, but it's like they mentioned there's maybe tunnels of it underground. And it's a hive mind, which I think makes it more terrifying, but also I think that works better for TV.
Just quick. I know part of the behind the scenes again, and I know you're gonna look at these too, but they are released like the day once the episode's been released, and they're very short, few minutes on YouTube that I've seen, and they explain that because I know there's been conversations about the spores and what happens with that, because that's quite prominent in the game, and they have to wear gas masks and stuff, whereas that's not the case here. And you're absolutely right, and that is what they say. It's for TV, you can't have concentrated areas where spores are prominent, because if that's airborne, it means it could be anywhere. You would then just have an airborne virus or something that anyone and everyone could be infected, so that wouldn't work. So having actual physical pieces of fungi that can be however small or grow up to a mile apparently, but we see what happens at the end of this episode. It is very, very creepy. It's very disturbing, and it adds a whole other layer to the cordyceps coming out of the mouth and what that does and the connections, and I think it adds to, because we see people engulfed by fungi and like attached to walls and stuff, and I think that just adds a sense of, oh, that is how that happens. Because in my mind, it was a little bit, when I was playing the game, is, oh, how does that effectively happen? How do people get basically trapped there? But now it makes, for me, makes more sense, and it just adds again another layer of horror, which I think this series is always going to need to go back to, because that is the crux of it. Apart from, you know, all the other emotions that this story will bring out in you, you need those elements of horror, but these moments of strength as well, which I think Tess shows immense strength in her final moments, and I think this is like her final kind of evolution to, do you know what, I've done what I've done, but I need to do this, and this is important, and Joel, you need to do this. If you're gonna do one thing in this whole life which isn't about me, you're gonna do that one thing, and it's gonna be to protect her and take her to Bill and Frank.
And this is the moment that got me more uncomfortable than anything, is that I don't want to say there's no heroic ending. There's something about the way the scene played out, which it's going to sicken a lot of people. And I think the first thing I saw was a tweet from someone saying it's like gross dudes at a nightclub, which probably wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
There's a moment when you see the horde coming and Tess is stood in the middle. And you get the oil barrels, you get the grenades, and you think, okay, this is very different. I almost said the game. This is a lot better than the game did it, because I actually don't like how it plays out in the game, but it makes logistical sense from a playthrough type thing.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stuck with me with this one is that you've got this big triumphant moment, and it doesn't come delivered, because what is the core of The Last of Us? The Last of Us is a series and a game about survival. It's the title is The Last of Us. It's about humanity. And the moment Tess is sort of confronted, not that she hides at the side, it's not that at all, but there's a great shot in the rewatch of they're running through the petrol, the first runners, but the moment when it's not a clicker, it's not a runner, I don't know what you'd call it.
Is it a stalker? Because I know there's those, and it's like halfway.
There's so many different types. Yeah. It's got a bit of the crusty head, hasn't it? But it can still see. And there was something horrifying that maybe the most haunting moment in this series has been this moment, which he's not trying to bite her. He's kind of kissing her, right? Like, it's not me. It's just pointing out the blatantly obvious there. But there's a brief moment where the light is not working, and you actually think, shit, are they not going to make it out of here? Are they done for? And obviously, you know they're not. But the way that last scene played out, I've not seen anything like it. Like, I was like uncomfortably invested in that moment, that she didn't say, like, fuck you, let's blow everyone up together as you're running into me, like I Am Legend, which is a very fair comparison, but she was afraid. And it's is she going to turn? Is she actually going to set the lighter off? And it was so well done, that last moment. And then you see her close her eyes as the flame engulfs, a la Rogue One. Rest in peace, Baze Marvelous. But how did you find that scene? Because I knew it was coming again today, and I was creeped out the first time. I'm creeped out the second time, but I can't put the words into context. I think because what I see on Twitter, which nailed it, is literally just creepy dudes at a club.
Yeah.
The image of them, I think it's when they're moving, like they're going into it's weird. It's weird, but it's like very well done.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to swear so much during the series, but I knew that I was going to say when mentioning this is fucking creepy. Like, that was what I said when it happened. I was like, this is fucking creepy. I don't like it. I was confused, so confused. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. Why was this happening? What did it mean? And my only thought, actually, it was, and it kind of relates to Alien a little bit. And you know how...
Which one?
So, you know, in Alien 3, to just go on a very side note tangent here.
I was hoping you said the 1 or 2 because I watched them
Oh.
recently. But let's plug the Aliens review quickly from the James Cameron stuff from last week. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Sam. But sorry, Alien 3.
No worries, I love that. But anyway, Alien 3. So the alien in that film does not attack Ripley because Ripley, spoiler alert, has a queen inside her. She has an alien inside her, so she doesn't... The alien doesn't rip her apart or anything. My only thought is that this stalker, whatever this version of the infected is, knows that she's been bitten and that he wants to... That the fungi itself has some form of intelligence or enough to kind of notice that there's fungi inside her and that he wants to connect via the mouth and get the cordyceps down her throat to connect with you. That's my only idea of what that could be, and I hope something is confirmed, because just the idea of that, just thinking that up in my head was like, oh, why am I even thinking this? But it was the only form of logical thing that you could think of in this completely illogical scenario and situation. But the look of horror in her eyes, in her face, is awful, and
the slow approach to her as well, isn't it?
It's that out of focus. It's out of focus. You see, it stopped. It's facing her direction. Oh no, what's going on? And it is the fact that you would expect, oh, well, she's going to be devoured, she's going to be mauled, whatever it is, and that doesn't happen, and it throws you completely off guard. And it's things like this that are going to make me think, what else are they going to do? Because that is horrifying.
No, and that's it, isn't it? And we're on episode 2, and we've got this moment. You think of how traumatic the first episode had been. We've had a kid dying. We've had a soldier getting his turned into like mashed potato at the end of an episode. We've had this week. We've had the autopsy, which was quite like not visually disgusting, but it was that was a very uncomfortable scene. But that's how autopsies would be, right? At the start of a pandemic. The cordyceps, the fact that going back to the opening scene, the cordyceps coming out the throat as well. Mm-hmm. And that's how the episode ends. Like they've planned this very well today. They've structured that 2003 scene in at the right moment, and to end it with Tess. And I think the other thing that sells the whole thing is Pedro Pascal again. It's the moment where Joel just grabs Ellie and goes. Like he knows his friend is dead. He knows what his mission is, and his mission is his mission. And it's Ellie trying to save Tess, and he knows it's done for. And I just thought, he's got such a subtle performance in this, but he's going to get so much development, we hope, over the coming episodes, that we're going to see this sort of... Because he wears his heartless soul is basically his armor. And the first game's the same. It's about Joel opening up as a person, let alone as a human being. And I think that's something that they can really explore well, and kind of with Anna Torv and the performance. Something actually, the game, I didn't actually realize until a couple of days ago. So obviously I've been playing the PS5 version. I've not played the PS4 one since before Part 2 came out. Sorry, what was that, like start of 2020? They changed the character model of Tess to make her look middle-aged rather than look like a 20-year-old, which maybe it's in line with the series changing, but I love the fact that Tess in this is older, she's weathered, like Joel, she's been through the ranks, and that beautiful moment, which is so heartbreaking, is when she screams, "That's not my home," when he mentions about going back to the quarantine zone, because we know she's been bitten, and she knows her home is not here. It's not been this. This is survival. This wasn't her life, and I love how ambiguous she is with that we don't know what home is to her, and it kind of makes her all the more traumatizing. And heading into that finale, Joel and Ellie walking away. The explosion was great, but they're off to see Bill and Frank. Tess said, "Get them to Bill and Frank," and the rest, and they'll cover the rest, which sets up episode 3 very well. I'm smiling because
I know you're smiling.
This is the one people. I've been more refrained than most on my social media. I've seen people saying, "You gotta watch A, B, and C and D, and this, and this, and everyone's gonna riot at this. Everyone's gonna be like this." I'm just sat there like, I've seen them. Shut up and let people fucking watch the show. Let them enjoy themselves. It's right to say how great an episode is, but I just can't imagine people saying, "Oh, some people might not like this next episode. Some people might not like the change they do down the line." I'm like, have you all fucking seen it? No, I have. So you have seen it. Just let people enjoy and build up, because episode 3 is one of the big ones. It's the second longest episode of the series. And I think that's a very, you look at episode 1, it's 2 episodes together, as I've said. Episode 3 is a massive episode. And it is going to be very exciting to talk about. And I'm trying to sort myself down now because I've just had a go at people talking about other episodes. But I'm watching episode 2 because I'm uploading these shorts in between these weekly things. And this is all just a test scheme to basically, I'm recording shorts because I'm not getting the experience of week to week, which I missed out on the amazing flower discourse because I knew, yeah, it is a flower, but I'm not a dick who's going to say something because I know. Do you know what I mean? I'm enjoying people theorizing, thinking what might happen next week, what might not, because I don't have the luxury of that, I'm afraid. So I'm excited to see the build up to next week, to future episodes. The test story arc has ended, as we know. And where is the show going to go next? And Bill and Frank I'm a massive fan of Nick Offerman, so my hype's been here from the day he was cast as Bill, but I'm very excited to see the show move forward next week. But that's a weird way for me to outro on. I'm just going to hand over to you, just what have you heard about 3 that's not a spoiler? Or is it just you've heard from other people that 3 is a big one?
Mostly from you, really, which is fair enough. We're absolutely fair enough. Because it's to do with Bill and Frank that I may have more of an interest in that, and I'm absolutely intrigued about what they're going to do with their story, and what's going to happen. I can't say that I would know for sure. I absolutely do not believe it's going to follow what happens in the game, at least not completely anyway. They've got this opportunity to do whatever. And also, I think with anything with this series, just really quickly as a whole, it's been 10 years since the game came out. So I think over 10 years, you're going to think creatively, right, well, it's like George Lucas going back to Star Wars films. Whether you agree with him or not,
yeah, it's a really good comparison.
It would be interesting to go back to a work that you've been on and go, what would I have done differently? Knowing what I know now after years of development and gaining new skills and new insights and new perspectives, how can I then go back to this and make it better, quote unquote. And I think this is what this show now has the opportunity to do, is to look at the game and go, right, well, what can we change? What do we want to improve upon? Because I guarantee no one is going to ever be perfectly happy with the work that they do. And if they say that they are, they're probably going to lie because they need it to sell, whatever it is. But there's always things. If you created anything, there's going to be things that you're going to want to change. But really, in terms of how the next episode is going to lay out, I'm really not sure, because I'm a fan of watching officially released things, not spot. Like people say, oh, well, that next time trailer's a spoiler, and I'm like, well, it's not a spoiler because it's an actual release thing. That if it was on, normal TV, if it was a BBC One show, an ITV show, they would usually show something at the end anyway. So I really hate it when people will just cut it out like, no, I just want to be completely, free. It's like, well, whatever, you do you. But I would choose to watch that. And so I saw bits of it, and I can believe that there'll be some post-test grief, but also with the place still so early in the Ellie and Joel relationship, they can't really, afford to be too soppy about that. And they're not going to be. I expect, because they need to continue forward. And if anyone's going to be more emotional about it, it probably would be Ellie, because I think her and Tess really, started to form a bond there towards the end. And I think Joel's just going to feel more of a sense of, oh, well, I've got to do this, and I'm mad that Tess is gone, and all that stuff. And then I just don't know how much of Bill and Frank we're going to get, but I can imagine it is going to be quite a significant part. But yeah, I'm more in the dark now. Now that Tess is gone, I'm more in the dark about what happens in kind of like this mid area that we're going to get into now. Even though we're still so early in the series, but it does feel like we've gone quite a way. I'm just really excited about it, because from what I've heard, which is not a lot, but I feel like I've got to be prepared for this one in all sorts of ways.
No, definitely. And I think that's what's going to be exciting, is that I know I didn't message you before. So, what did you think immediately? I know we did episode 1, but I think next Monday is going to be one where I'm going to see you on Friday, so we'll chat. But I'm gonna text people. But episode 3 next week is going to be a really interesting one to see, and I really hope people get the chance to see it before they go online. I would honestly tell anyone. I mean, I'd do this for the show anyway. It's like Game of Thrones. You wake up on a Monday, you go on Twitter, there's already out of context memes. Out of context means there's still enough to work out what things are. So it's just that if you want to watch this show without anyone telling you things, without memes, watch it live on a Monday at 2 a.m. in the UK, or wake up early before work and watch it first thing.
Which is what I'm having to do.
I just wish The Mandalorian would do it. The Mandalorian Disney updates at 8 in the morning. That's the moment I start work on my one day in the office. I can't watch Disney Plus before I work anymore.
And the thing is that happens at 8, and then you get the out of context things by 9 o'clock. So it's just
you get them at 8:03. Like sort of like, oh my god, this opening scene, and they've took photos. I'm like, can you not? But the web is a horrible place, but there are good corners of it in some places, and I hope this is one of them.
The web is awful, but please continue to watch this series. Continue to watch us talk about it.
Exactly. And kind of in line with that, if I give my final thoughts on episode 2, I love this episode. I think it was a great follow-up because episode 1 and 2 is almost like a mini story. Like I sort of said it's like Tess's story is complete. That's how I feel it with the game, that you meet characters, you spend time with them. Their story arc comes to an end, your characters go somewhere else or you go forward in time, etc., etc. And that's the beauty of The Last of Us. It's spending time with other people. And I just think from what they've demonstrated on the first 2 episodes, Anna Torv's performance as Tess has been amazing. And the relationship you've built up with Pedro Pascal, with Ellie getting developed as well, and Bella Ramsey, the performance developing with it. It's a really great start to a TV series. And, with 2 episodes in that at 9, and it's going to be really exciting seeing week to week what it's going to be like for other people moving forward. And yeah, it's just fundamentally an excellent start to, I think I said last week, this is probably going to be my show of the year. I don't care. It's January. I've waited 10 years for this. And week to week has been amazing. And I'm excited to see what so many other people think. There's the official podcast I need to catch up on. There's behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff happening. So it's going to be one of them. It's exciting. But Sam, over to you. Final thoughts on episode 2, Infected.
Very solid, very strong. I feel it continues with the momentum that was set up last time. It doesn't feel like a dip in quality or anything, which is again why it's such a shock that it's Druckmann's directorial debut for live action. I think that's absolutely insane, but very commendable. I'm sure he's had a lot of support and help with it, but it comes out in the final product that we've seen today. Loved. The character moments are really important, and they're going to continue to be important. So it's just good that we managed to get more context and more conversations, whether it's about the actual events that are going on in game or just other references or just little tidbits that help actually, allow us to see who the characters are underneath the armor, because each of the characters that we've met have got some level of armor on, some form of facade that they don't want to kind of let out their sensitive emotional side. And of course, I think for me, the highlight was the 2003 Jakarta scenes, because I think I love when things connect, and I love when there's added context to things that I like being told what's going on or shown what's going on. Not everything, but it's good to get a good sense of, okay, this is the world, and to actually get to scene where they are actually using engineers and actors, and actually, just actually having them speak how they would speak and doing the subtitles that match. For me, just allows me to get invested into the world way more than if it was just generic Washington DC. Oh God, this is happening, or whatever else. So I absolutely loved it, and just all the performances across the board, I think, are either stellar or improved upon last week's. So just continuing to hope that we go on an upward or maintain this trajectory as we enter episode 3 and beyond.
Definitely. What a great way to put it and to end on it. And once again, it's been a pleasure having you host this with me. And we want to hear from everyone at home. So please do comment your thoughts on The Last of Us episode 2, episode 1. If you played the game, if you're going to pick up the game and you've not, get the conversation going. It's exciting being a Last of Us fan at the moment. And as we've said before, if you do like this video, please do consider hitting the like button. It does mean a lot. Helps support the channel, support the video, get the subscriber numbers up, because The Last of Us isn't going away anytime soon on this channel. There's a lot more videos coming, not just Series 1. There might be some stuff after, which there'll be more details about after the series has finished in regards to that. But if you are curious about any of the videos, you're best off getting us on social media. Twitter and Instagram @cinema_savvy. Facebook and Letterboxd.com/CinemaSavvy, and a link to Redbubble in the description below, where you can pick up some merch. Now, as we said, the Last of Us discussions are every Monday. These are locked in. And it's Oscar season, so tomorrow we're going to be live with our Oscars prediction. We do it every year. There'll be a way for you to get involved at home as well. So if you are a fan of Oscar season, award season, films, more so than TV, you can obviously join us on that, comment your thoughts, etc. That's tomorrow night. Then we've got the James Cameron stuff. On Wednesday, we've got The Abyss, which was a really interesting film to review. And there's just so many new releases coming out. There's films coming out I didn't know about. There's even games coming out. Not that I review them, but I forgot that I actually need to pre-order some alongside other things. So it's a crazy time at the moment. It's a big start to 2023, and not to get excited for April, but there's some Star Wars Celebration news today, and obviously we're all going to be going to that. We're going to be covering that. And if you are curious at home, if you missed out on tickets for Star Wars Celebration, we're not getting any money from Lucas for saying it, but tickets, there's going to be more tickets on sale on Friday. So if you had missed out, if you were gutted, Friday you got your chance to pick some up. So I'm just going to politely put that out there because I got weekend tickets. Sorry, individual day passes are a rip-off. But aside from that, thank you all for watching. Join us on the next one. And we might even have a very cool announcement for down the line, which more details will follow. But aside from that, as I said once more, Sam, thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone at home. Take care.